on better line, but thanks a lot for taking time out for us. That's the view from N. Kumar of Prime Securities. We're still awaiting the verdict on telecom. Deepak Shenoy is still with us. Deepak, so what about a stock like Vodafone Idea now? Because the jury is out on whether they get staggered payments over say 10 or 15 years. Even then, does the company have the financial muscle power to survive? And of course, the other point being, what if the verdict is against them and they don't get 15 to 20 years, they get much less than that? Your view on the stock?
So, Anuj, the stock itself it's almost like a semi-binary kind of possibility, like the way you said. On the upside, on the downside, it's if the Supreme Court verdict comes against them, they, I think, are going to be tottering close to bankruptcy because there is no way they can raise that kind of money. Their debt equity ratios have reduced substantially after a fairly substantial rights issue recently, and also I don't think with that they will be able to move forward unless they can negotiate down debt substantially, and that is not positive for the stock. On the flip side, if the court allows them to pay over a long period of time, it still calls into question their ability to compete with relatively more well-heeled players like Bharti and Reliance, and in a way they'll have to still raise more capital at some point to be able to perhaps increase infrastructure or change their business model accordingly. So I know that they have in the last 2 quarters perhaps increased their ARPUs a little bit, gotten a little bit more financially stable, but I think the overhang of debt is too much. I would rather bet on them staying third or a new player coming in perhaps at a later point. But if you want to take a bet on telecom, I think Vodafone Idea is the wrong bet. You should go with Bharti or Reliance. So as a disclosure, we're invested in both. So I'm biased in that respect.
Fair enough. By the way, the first observation from Supreme Court for the day, the Supreme Court is asking Vodafone, did you ensure provisioning for AGR liabilities? And the demands have been raised by the DOT, so why not provided for by Vodafone? So that is important. That's the first, so far, of course, we've had the counsels who are putting forward their point. This is the first observation that we have for the day from Supreme Court. This is very important. This is, now we should keep only this line on the flashes. So the ticker team is listening. That is an important part which the Supreme Court is asking, that did you ensure that there was enough? Because the point being raised is that so much net worth has been eroded, and accounting for other losses, other expenses, losses are over 1 lakh crores. In that case, the Supreme Court is asking, you knew that there was this issue which was raised by DOT. So did you provide for Voda? So that's an important issue. But we'll keep having more details on that. But before we get more on those, the market's taking off a little bit. Infosys and Reliance are the stocks which are doing well right now. So let's take the BTST calls. Ashwani, your calls for 3 p.m.
First of all, the Dow futures and Europe were lower, 1 hour back, and they are recovering. So like I said, if the global cues start to recover, we will have a further upside. So that way, last half an hour could be very, very interesting, given that we have news flow also. So Dabur is a buy with a stop of 490, target of 520. UPL is a buy with a stop of 448, target of 470, and Adani Enterprise is a buy with a stop of 156, target of 168.
Okay, let's quickly get the other calls in as well before we hear more from the court. Mitesh, your trades.
So I have 2 BTST calls. The first one is a BTST in UPL with a stop at 447 for targets of 457, and Voltas as well, BTST with a stop at 593 for targets of 608.
Okay, well, we were bargaining for the judgment to be out by now. That's not out yet, but we have clearly first observation from the Supreme Court. Now, for those who want to know what should be the way forward on some of these stocks, you want to keep an eye on, of course, Vodafone Idea, Bharti Infratel, Bharti Airtel, Reliance, and the banking stocks. I think Bharti Airtel is the stock which a lot of people believe it's a win-win situation for them. There's staggered payment, good for them. But if there's an interest component, then in that case, perhaps Bharti doesn't opt for that and straight away pays for it, and Bharti has raised resources. And in that case, Vodafone will be a weak third player, which will be good news for Bharti. So that's what the general consensus is as far as Bharti is concerned. Of course, if the verdict is not so favorable, then the stocks that will be vulnerable would be Idea itself, Bharti Infratel, IDFC First Bank, and IndusInd Bank. So these are the stocks that you want to keep on your radar as far as this judgment is concerned. Deepak Shenoy is still with us. Deepak, Mukul Rohtage is saying that we had not provided earlier because we had won earlier in TDSAT, and they made provision in the previous fiscal for 38,000 crores. So it was made, but because they won in TDSAT, so that's why this year they didn't make that provision. Deepak, I wanted your thoughts on a stock like, say, an IDFC First Bank. It's become a bit of a binary play on what's happening with telecom.
Yeah, and it's sad because actually their metrics were quite good in the last quarter. I think also that you see while they have a fairly large dependency, they've been trying to move more to retail. They've gotten to a 31% CASA. Their interesting point of development is on September 30th, the 5-year 40% minimum exposure of IDFC expires. So I believe there will be some kind of effort by IDFC Limited to give its shareholders maybe shares of IDFC Bank and unroll that or unwind that promoter shareholding to the extent that RBI allows promoter shareholding to fall to. And there's going to be an RBI paper on that. So there may be an overhang of liquidity on that stock, if you may, but it will also, I think, provide more strength and benefit to it. They've also raised, I think, 2,000 odd crores in equity last year, so that will give it some level of stability. And once we pass through the AGR, if everything is okay, Vodafone has been paying its dues so far. I think in July they paid Franklin Templeton Mutual Fund as well. So I think the issue of what happens afterwards is, if clearly I think Vodafone and the Birla Group may not want to give up or let it default in case there's a favorable court verdict, then we could see some push up in IDFC First Bank as well. But I think banks, the biggest issue is going to be in September, or which will appear to us only in November, of how much the NPAs really are after the moratorium is complete. So I would just say, take cautious steps here, maybe a little bit at one time. But within the banking sector, I still think, a larger bank may be one that survives, and you've got to bet on the one that survives. So just no positions here. I'm still waiting and watching.